One of the great sins, I think, against heaven is how racially segregated our churches are. You know, when we read about heaven, do you know what heaven is? According to Revelation 21, where the nations and every tribe and every tongue and every people bring their splendor into heaven. You think he's just going to keep us nicely segregated and then in heaven, boom, we're all interracial? Did you think that that's just going to happen in heaven? Or did you think that God had some intent that we as a people of God would start to lay the groundwork for that right here and now?
First Nations people have heard the gospel in the past, and now it's time that they see it lived, because what they heard and what they saw didn't match up.
There's got to be healing and repentance and acceptance by the non-Native community for what actually was perpetrated on these people.
My name is Tal James. I'm part of the Penelakut Nation, which is part of the Coast Salish tribal region here on Kuper Island and Vancouver Island in the Lower Mainland area. As far as our people are concerned, the Penelakut people and many of the other people in the Coast Salish region, the waterways has traditionally been our lifeline. We would do our trading through the waterways. Many of our people were avid canoers as a result of the fact that they needed to be. And really, without the water, we wouldn't have a life.
My name is Graham Bruce, and I grew up here. This is called Stewart Channel, right mid-coast of Vancouver Island.
This is why coming home from traveling around the world is the best thing you can ever have. I mean, you can go off anywhere and you can't beat where you live. Absolutely spectacular.
I'm Mark Buchanan. I'm the pastor of New Life Community Baptist Church in Duncan. I've been in this valley for 10 years. This is a Cowichan River. It's one of the most beautiful rivers in the world. For thousands of years, this has been important to the Cowichan tribes. This is a source of life for them. It's provided the fish that they've eaten. It's provided a link between the communities up and down. The wood off of the sides of the banks of this river was used for building their homes, building their canoes. Back in the early part of the 1800s, when the Cowichans were over in the Fraser River across the water where they went for the seasonal fishing grounds, the British moved in and they saw the beauty of this valley and they simply claimed it as their own. And when the Cowichan people came back from the seasonal fishing grounds, it was occupied. And that's where a lot of the land disputes came from. And again, there was never any settlement. There was never any payment. There was never any real discussion, real conversation around that. A lot of the land, including the church that I pastored, is on land that was stolen. And just how that gets settled and what it's going to cost us becomes deeply personal.
That's Kuper Island back there, and that's actually where the residential school for virtually the better part of Vancouver Island is situated. Lots and lots of the folks were taken from their families and brought to the school. Now the school's no longer there, but the memories are still very much alive.
The government and some churches within Canada were in partnership to take Native children from their homes, in some cases move them hundreds of miles away.
They were forbidden to speak their language. They were forbidden to associate with their siblings in these schools. And they were also deloused, whether they had lice or not. A lot of these kids were considered savages, and they were treated as such.
Many of them were sexually abused. The great majority were emotionally abused and physically abused. That went on generation after generation after generation. And one of the great tragedies of it, if you talk to most non-natives in the community, they have very little awareness that that happened in our backyard.
Here we have concrete slabs, brick, stonework, all representative of the residential school that was constructed in 1881 and torn down in 1986. What this represents is the beginning of the healing process of the First Nations people. Torn up, broken, destroyed. No longer does it have the power over the First Nations people as it once had.
If we continue doing things the same way we've been doing for the last 50, 75, 100 years, these people have no hope at all. And when you think you're only 35 miles from the capital of this province, and right here is a pocket of virtual third world poverty, it's absolutely shameful.
I think we need to look at ourselves as a church, capital C church, because we have a responsibility in that. The fruit of the past is the present. All these atrocities happen in the name of Christ, and we have a responsibility to help remedy that situation.
It's time we stood up to the table, changed the way we did things, recognized that the systems that were in place, either intentionally or not, are all directed in such a way that these people will fail and keeps them down.
I met Graham Bruce about 5 years ago. He was hauled into here by his brother who had got here and liked it and became a Christian. So Graham started showing up. And about a year into his showing up, he becomes a Christian. And right after that, he gets into provincial politics. And then last May, lost the election. There's all these people consoling him and lamenting and all of that. And he walks in the room, and I could tell he was the happiest guy. And he comes up, and I'm one of the first people to greet him at the door, and we hug. And he leans into me and he says, "I just can't wait to see what God's got for me now."
Graham has become increasingly interested in Cowichan and began to realize that there were many issues that needed addressing.
He got a phone call on his cell phone, and it was some of the leaders of the Cowichan tribe and saying, "Would you lead the North American Indigenous Games that will happen here in 2008.
And I said, yeah, providing we get past that, providing we can move into these other issues of true reconciliation.
Over the past year or so since the election, he's been in our community, learning more and more about our culture. I think he's like a sponge and he just takes this all in and becoming a very serious asset to our community with respect to the sort of programs we're working on for Cowichan to try to get out of these third world conditions.
This is a spiritual issue, that the church actually has committed something terribly wrong here and have never really repented of it. We're so going into this on faith, and we're going one step at a time, and we really don't know what this will look like a year from now.
The way I see it, it's like if you got a cut on your finger, and it only takes a split second to draw blood from that finger, but it may take anywhere from a week to 2 weeks for that to heal. But if there's an infection, it's going to take even longer. It's going to take a long time, but those are steps that I'm willing to take because it's vital to the survival of our people spiritually. I don't mean to sound bleak at all. My life isn't full of despair. I've got hope in my life, and that hope comes through Jesus Christ.
There is a feel in this community and actually across the land of this shameful part of our life has got to be corrected, and that the leaders to make that happen are going to have to be those people who call themselves Christians, those people who would say that they were followers of Christ are the ones that are going to have to stand up. And as difficult as it may be, and as uncomfortable as it will be, unless they do that, we won't make it right.